I wish to share with you words from a dear friend now deceased, Marjorie Bowens-Wheatley, who writes in our hymn book, "If we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white, it will not matter. If you are female and I am male, it will not matter. If you are older and I am younger, it will not matter. If you are progressive and I am conservative, it will not matter. If you are straight and I am gay, it will not matter. If you are Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as siblings, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened. And that does matter. In this spirit, we become a community."
Sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice. Let all things living now sing and rejoice. Sing and rejoice, 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 sing and rejoice.
I invite you now to share together in this responsive reading taken from the work of the contemporary thinker and writer Bell Hooks. The wounded child inside many males is a boy who, when he first spoke his truths, was silenced by a patriarchal world that did not want him to claim his true feelings. The wounded child inside many females is the girl who was taught that she must deny her true feelings in order to attract and please others. When men and women punish each other for truth-telling, we reinforce the notion that lies are better. To be loving, we must hear the other's truth and affirm the value of truth to tell. Lies may make people feel better, but they do not help us to know love. There's some wisdom in those words for sure. Speaking of wisdom, I have the pleasure of serving with Jack Woller, our executive director, a man of uncommon wisdom for his tender years. I say that as someone who no longer has any tender years left. But he will bring vigor and vitality to his words about our fall campaign. Jack, please help us understand where we're going this year.
Good morning. That was pretty good for a fall-back daylight savings time morning. As Fred said, it's my honor to serve as the executive director here at Fountain Street Church for a little over 15 months now. And one thing that I think I can say confidently is that nobody knows everything there is to know about Fountain Street Church, with the possible exception of Abby Bowers. So in the 15 plus months, I've only scratched the surface, but man, what a surface it is to scratch. I mean, this is a remarkable institution. I mean, aesthetic, everything. So one thing I am sure I know is that after 33 years of service, our Gail McConnell is going to be retiring next month on December 1st. And I also know that she was none too pleased with me this week because I asked her if we could include an insert in the order of service. So maybe you have peeked and maybe you've looked at it, maybe you haven't, but like any of us, with the possible exception of you, Abby, this sheet leaves things out. And the sheet shows some of the things that this institution has accomplished this year in 2017. And don't worry, I'm not going to read them all to you. That was why we put the insert in, but 105 worship services. And this one, there's a couple of them, not just to signal them out, but over $90,000 awarded in social action grants to the community locally, nationally, and internationally. Over 90,000. Yeah, it deserves a round of applause to that. 152 community events. That's not Fountain Street community events. That's support of West Michigan. If you see on there again, the Fountain Street ones, that's 1,595. And we may plus or minus another 20 to 40. And 5,000 between Washington, D.C. and Grand Rapids here locally, 5,000 plus individuals participating in last January's Women's March events. That also is pretty remarkable. Absolutely. So like all of us, this sheet leaves things out. In fact, it's even a smaller version so that Gail would let me put it in. So as we begin this season of asking for support for the next page of the chapter in the book that is Fountain Street Church, I hope that that the I Am Fountain Street resonates with you, because none of that would have been able to be done or done by and through support by all of our people. Because it is all of you and the thousands that are not in attendance today that make that possible. So as we begin this, I hope that resonates with you. Pledge packets have gone out to our entire mailing list. There's some available in the narthex of the information. And for the next 4 weeks, a member of the stewardship committee will be at a table in the social hall. And in fact, Bob Chapela's in there right now. So I'm gonna give you another chance that morning of the fallback daylight saving time zone. We'll count of 3. We're gonna say hi, Bob, because we're streamed into there. Okay? So it's hi, Bob on 3. 1, 2, 3. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. Look at that. Look how advanced we are. We're teleconferencing in the service. So I'm going to leave you with one last statistic, and that is that in 2017, our average pledge for the annual campaign was $1,788. However, Fountain Street Church budgeted to spend $2,279 per pledge unit. And so I'm going to leave you with a question. Can you imagine a West Michigan without Fountain Street Church? I like your answer, but I didn't expect it. I expected it, just not that loud. So would Eleanor Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, or any of the hundreds of other people who stood right here, which is not lost on me, by the way, visited West Michigan if it wasn't for Fountain Street Church? The groups organizing for social action, finding support, community, where would they go? All of us. Support, community, where would we go? So can you imagine a West Michigan without Fountain Street Church? Through your support, we don't ever have to find out the answer to that question. Thank you so much, and welcome to Fountain Street Church.
I want to be ready. in Jerusalem just like John. I want to be ready. I want to be ready. I want to be ready. To walk in Jerusalem. To walk in Jerusalem.
So on my way through the book of Psalms this year, which like a rock climbing expedition yields few handholds from time to time, but many good views, I'm at Psalm 7. I'm sure you've been reading it all week long. Actually, maybe you did, and good on you if you did. But I want to give you a truncated version because it's long enough that you'll forget the first part. David's ranting again, what can I say? So I want to give you just a flavor of what's going on. Now, when I say David, the whole book of Psalms is attributed to King David because he sang and pleased God. But historically speaking, the Psalms were created many years later, assembled through various sources, put into various numbers of books, such that two of them are virtually identical. They must have been in two separate collections and then piled together without realizing it. So we don't know who wrote them, but we do know they were used in worship, even though sometimes they feel very personal, as in this case. This is a psalm of David concerning Cush, a Benjaminite. Who? A what? We'll get to that. God, in you I seek refuge. Deliver me from all my pursuers and save me, lest like a lion they tear me apart, rending me in pieces, and no one save me. My God, if I have done such things as they, if my hands bear the guilt of wrongdoing, if I have dealt evil to my ally, then let the enemy pursue and overtake me. Let him trample my life to the ground and lay my body in the dust. I look to God to shield me, the deliverer of the upright. God vindicates the righteous. God pronounces doom each day. Doom means judgment, just by the way. Here are the verses that stuck with me, though. If one does not turn back, but whets his sword, bends his bow and aims it, then against himself he readies his deadly weapons and makes his arrows sharp. See, he hatches evil, conceives mischief, and gives birth to fraud. I'm going to let that sit right there. There are a few more verses, but you don't need to hear them. Conceives mischief, gives birth to fraud. Aristophanes, whom I'll refer to later, is famous for his comedies in ancient Greece. Among them, Lysistrata. Do you know the story? Warring men go on and on in their wars, and the women eventually get so sick of the war they withhold their conjugal services, as it were, until they stop fighting. And one of the characters, a woman, speaks to the great council in these words, translated, of course. What matters that I was born a woman if I can cure your misfortunes? I pay my share of tolls and taxes by giving my men to the state, but you miserable graybeards, you contribute nothing to the public charges. On the contrary, you have wasted the treasure of our forefathers, as it was called, the treasure amassed in the days of the Persian wars. You pay nothing at all in return, and into the bargain you endanger our lives and liberties by your mistakes. Have you one word to say for yourselves? Don't irritate me, you there, or I'll lay my slipper across your jaws, and it's a pretty heavy one at that. And finally, contemporary words, just one sentence from Rebecca West. People call me a feminist whenever I express statements that distinguish me from a doormat. I really am looking forward to the next anthem. It's classical, but that's my preferred style anyway. And we'll get to enjoy not just our music director, who has prepared the choir, but also Linda Jones, who will be our guest conductor of the piece, and the choir, which, boy, aren't you numerous today? How marvelous. But I want to look at the title, because I think it's also a psalm text. Am I correct in that? All right. Oh, how amiable. Amiable is a lovely word, isn't it? It's kind of like friendly, welcoming, amiable. It's related to the word amas, to love, lovable. How lovable. How marvelous to think about that. So I'm wondering what makes something lovable. Pretty things are lovable. The church, babies, stuff like that. What makes something lovable? Well, I've told you in years past, but for those who don't remember, I define love as holding something else or someone else's well-being as essential to your own. Parents get this instantaneously. But I think you can understand it, that there could be at least one other person out there whose happiness makes you happier, whose sadness makes you sadder, such that you cannot be purely happy without their happiness. I think that's what love is. It isn't how I feel about someone, it's how well they are. And I want you to think for a moment of something, someone, a child, grandchild, spouse, parent, who is like that for you. I know you have several, at least I hope you do. And on that we will turn our hearts toward prayer, so that we may know what is lovable. Let's do this. With each breath we take in, a fragment of the universe reminds us that there is life everywhere. In my lungs, in the air itself, teeming with microbes. Out beyond me, the faces I see and can know, the sound of other breathing beings. We come here to hear the pulse of life, to feel the breathing of being itself, to align our hearts and breaths, our minds, with that largeness of being that surrounds us. Yea, how amiable is this place, when we know the words flow into us like water, that the notes pass through us like breezes. We are swimming in life. That which words cannot name. Remind us to feel the water of life, to sense the breath of being, and know that it connects us to those so dear that we would give our lives for theirs. Rouse in us such sympathy that all suffering would make our lips tremble, and all joy would make us sing. On this, and upon all those things which we bring with us into this house, which are dearer still than the words I can utter, we give ourselves now to that prayer best known in the presence of silence. And so may it be. And amen. Well, the choir is sitting down. I'll tell you a brief story. 20 years ago, yes, it's 20 years ago, I made my first trip overseas to the city of London. And while I did all the standard stuff, I went to see a place called Bunhill Fields, which is a cemetery right outside the old city of London, which is where non-Anglicans were allowed to be buried. You couldn't be buried within the city if you were a dissenter, Baptist, Methodist, Congregationalist. And in fact, on one side of Bunhill Fields is the headquarters, the British headquarters of the Methodist Church, with a big statue of John Wesley right there. But I'm telling you this because I wanted to visit some graves. I love visiting cemeteries and visiting places where bones lie about. And one of them was Isaac Watts. Our God, our help in ages past, our hope for years. Great writer of hymns, often crafted from verses of Psalms. Before I begin, I lift up the names of those who in this year and years past completed their lives among us, who nonetheless, by their lives, gave us this house, this church, this community, and to whom we are ever grateful. The only name I have before me today is that of David Burkholder, who passed away last week. But there are others who I do not know, but nonetheless their lives are precious to us. And so I pray, as I do every week, asking their blessing. El Malei Rachamim Shokein B'Maryam, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence to the souls of our beloved ones who have gone to their eternal rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally, and bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace. And let us say, Amen. Sex! Might as well get it out there. There is nothing more potent than sex. The shibboleths of our time, abortion, gay rights, trans rights, women's rights, all about sex. In entertainment, find me a movie that isn't about sex or death or both. And religion, well, you could say religion can thank sex for coming into being. Somebody had to control it after all. And not one religion that I know of any consequence, let me put it that way, is okay with it. They all know it's dangerous stuff. Sex is powerful, and that's what makes it dangerous. And therefore something that has to be controlled. It's like fire. It's great to have, it gives you light and warmth and cooks your food, but you better keep it in a fireplace or it'll burn down the house. And so religions have created, along with their societies, clear rules about sex. Who can have it, with whom, when, how, where, whether. And very clear consequences for those who violate those rules. And yet, like the fire in the fireplace, if you look closely, it is never fully contained. In Psalm 7, on the way through the Psalter, there's King David again, beset by his adversaries. Frequent theme. It gets a little tiresome. He whines a lot. But this time he's naming an actual person, someone named Cush from the tribe of Benjamin. Now, you only need to know this much, that David was of the tribe of Judah, and the person he replaced, Saul, came from the tribe of Benjamin. So there's bad blood between these two already. I tried to find out more about Cush the Benjaminite. I've read a very long scholarly article about him, proving that no one knows who he is. I only mentioned that I read a long scholarly article, so you know I still read scholarly articles and I'm not coasting on my scholarly chops. And then Psalm 7 goes on to say, and he's very mean now, Mr. David, against himself he readies weapons. In other words, he thinks he's coming after me, but he's going to hurt himself. He makes his arrows sharp. And then he goes on to this phenomenal verse. See, he hatches evil, conceives mischief, and gives birth to fraud. He conceives. He gives birth. I know it's poetic license, but it's impossible. Males, do not conceive and give birth. That's kind of what makes us men. Why would David, the supposed author of the psalm, use such a preposterous metaphor? And that's how I spent my week, wondering what this fellow was trying to convey. Now, one thought that came to me was that he's trying to insult this Benjaminite fellow. Saying he conceives and delivers is essentially calling him a girl. And we boys know there's no insult worse on a playground than calling a boy a girl. Boys don't cry, that's what girls do. I remember at some point some waggish boy in my neighborhood, light, little older than me, said, "Look at your heel, now look at your fingernail. See, you did it like a girl." And I felt very insulted. I'm sure there are hundreds of teases and taunts that run through playgrounds around the world, all of them to keep boys and make sure they know they're better than girls. I cannot speak for girls. They didn't talk to me on these matters. The psalm may be 2,500 years old, but there's still a sense that calling a boy a girl, a man a woman, is something bad. Defending and insulting your masculinity apparently never gets old. The alt-right that we heard about this summer when they were in Charlottesville, I've done some research around them too. They hate immigrants and Muslims and brown people, but what they really don't like are girl people. That's what I'm finding out. It is profoundly about gender and about patriarchy. That men deserve to be in charge. That's the way it's supposed to be. A woman named Christina Lopez, who works for Media Matters, told National Public Radio, she studied this matter, that, quote, they focus on who is or isn't manly enough, using words that have been co-opted from pornography, she said. One of the words they use amongst themselves, the alt-right young men, is the word beta, B-E-T-A, which they use between themselves to describe a conservative man who appears to be weak or emasculated. It means, well, if you're a software person, a beta is a work in progress, not complete, inadequate. They use a word derived from cuckold. Cuck. It sounds awful, doesn't it? And they use it to say that someone has been co-opted. Liberals or other Americans are being cucked or cuckolded by other cultures who are coming and invading the U.S. and basically taking over our manly culture. In Psychology Today, I read that something called toxic masculinity, which Terry Cooper is a professor at the Wright Institute, defines as the constellation of male traits that serve to foster domination, the devaluation of women, homophobia, and wanton violence. So apparently, notwithstanding David being over 2,500 years old, calling a boy a girl is still potent stuff. But you see, that's not the only way you could read that curious verse. It's one way, and it's a very, very real way. But there's another way. Because if you push yourself through the Bible often enough, you'll find every now and then that God looks like a girl. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. God guarded Jacob as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young and spreads its wings to catch them and carry them aloft, it says in Deuteronomy. Think of a mother eagle. There's a powerful image, but very female. Like a bear robbed of her cubs, I will attack them, says the prophet Hosea, naming not himself but God. There's a scary mom if there ever was one. Isaiah says, as a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you, and you will be comforted over Jerusalem. I could go on. There are dozens of them. They're not the most famous or the best known, but that's a choice, isn't it? All of these other images of of God in the Bible convey a sense of what? Safety, protection, which we all remember when we needed a mom. One does not take refuge with someone weak, by the way. Mothers are strong. An expert on terrorism I heard years ago observed that when potential terrorists consider joining up with an organization, they often decline if their mothers hear about it and disapprove. There's some power right there. The words thus convey in their own way another kind of power or strength. But in this case, it could also be the quality of pregnancy itself, which is mysterious even to modern people like us. So David's verse could, in fact, refer to the hidden power of pregnancy and the mystery of childbirth, a sense of hidden capacities. Maybe the psalm is accusing Cush of plotting in secret, hiding his intentions. You can almost hear the stereotypes in it that women are weak and therefore use womanly wiles instead of being straightforward like men. And yet even this burst of patriarchal anger still has in it a kind of awe as well. Like, wow, look at what they can do with their bodies. For men, and being a male, I can only speak for this one, we are, and still in many ways will always be, boys. Women and mothers are awfully scary creatures. More than one culture and more than one scholar has noticed that there were primal female gods once that have been utterly erased from our cultures and histories now. People think they might have existed here and there, maybe in Knossos, in the island of Crete, other places, Ishtar and Astarte, and they've been obliterated by a male culture that wanted to get rid of them. The history of Israel is in some ways the history of a people worshiping a clearly male deity, going into a land populated by female gods and being told to wipe them out. And yet, whether David is accusing Cush of being effeminate or he's invoking mother bears and eagles, there remains ultimately and finally an essential ambiguity about gender itself that cannot be erased. Even though the cultures have been leveled, the temples have been destroyed, there is still something powerful about gender that lives in us today. And here is where we need to stop and think. Because I think there is no way that it cannot be ambiguous. I remember as a child meeting a teenager that when young men started growing their hair long in protest and to look like rock and roll singers, older adults said, "I can't tell if they're girls or boys." I could. We really could. And likewise, when younger women especially began wearing pants all the time, they look like men. No, they never did, not even once. But what bothered people was that they were violating, muddying, confusing the arbitrary line we had drawn between male and female, one that doesn't exist in nature, but we had erected for some reason. In this case, hair and clothing. But here's the thing we need to remember. Society itself, wherever it is essentially about who us is and who them are. We are in the society, they are not. We are separating people all the time, separating good from bad, right from wrong, us from them. And religion does the same thing when it separates sacred from profane, the holy from the unholy. Keeping things clear, keeping things separate goes way, way back to those first verses in Genesis when the earth was without form and void. And what did God do after God made the light? Separated the light from the darkness. Then separated the sky from the ground and the waters from the land. Separate. He's basically cleaning up a large mess. keeping things organized is a big deal in the Bible. And in troubling times, when things seem to be falling apart, when the world seems waste and void, we all feel a kind of urge to get away from it, to separate, to know that is over there and I'm over here and I'm safe and they're over there. What do we do in troubling times? We put up walls. Do we not? We keep out foreigners, whoever we decide a foreigner is. We protect our own, whoever our own are. And inside this ark of our own anxiety, law and order are administered by those with the strength to maintain order, lest chaos break out. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a wonderful writer of African origins, says, because human beings lived then in a world in which physical strength was the most important attribute for survival, the physically stronger person was more likely to lead, and men in general are physically stronger. But remember the word then. We lived in a world then. We don't live in that world now. Now, we could be saying that things have been falling apart for decades. Just ask any number of pundits on the right. The cultural divide in our nation has been about gender and sexuality since two things happened. The Supreme Court made abortion not a crime, and the Equal Rights Amendment tried and failed to become law. Those were lines that were so fixed in so many minds that the thought that they were going to go away turned their world into chaos. And now we have left the battles we have fought for the last 50 years about abortion, gay rights, transgender bathrooms, sexual harassment on scales previously unimagined, fundamentalist religion that cannot stop yelling about who's sleeping with whom or not, conservative and liberal politics that uses one or the other issue to distort who is with them and who is against them. They all arise from this primordial ambiguity about gender and sex and the power they have and always have had and always will have. But, oh, wonder of wonders, there is hope. At least I find hope in an odd place. Mr. Plato, than which a more patriarchal person you could rarely find. But in his book called The Symposium, a discussion about love, one of the characters is this same Aristophanes we heard earlier who was writing Lysistrata. And this same Aristophanes puts forth his theory of why humans fall in love. And his notion is that originally, years and years before, human beings were four-legged, four-armed, two-headed creatures that rolled along the ground. And the gods were so afraid of our capacities with all our arms and legs and heads that they cut us all in half. And ever since, we have been seeking our missing half. That love is the desire for completeness, for the part that is missing, and therefore gender is an artifact of destruction. Think about that. The Hebrew Bible actually contains a hint of this itself. In that famous passage about God making humans in his own image, and he does use the word, the Bible does use the word he. The first time it turns up in the first chapter it says, and I'm quoting now, so God created humans in his image. In the image of God he created them, male and female. He created them. In other words, God is gender queer. Think about it. God is male and female, or both, or neither, or something else entirely, but the reality is that God we refer to as he is beyond gender. God is actually the one who hangs out with all the strange-looking people who don't want to look male or female. You do know that's a phrase now, gender queer. It doesn't mean a biological thing as much as people who say, I refuse to become what other people say is male or female. I will be who I am, however I am, and it's not up to you to call me he or she. Which brings me to the last and peculiar thought I'm having. Maybe for all these centuries of fretting, worrying, and arguing, and legislating, and punishing, gender doesn't mean all that much. Maybe it's really rather trivial in the larger scheme of things. Chimamanda Adichie goes further, and I want to give you these wonderful words. She writes, "Today we live in a vastly different world." Let me repeat that. Today we live in a vastly different world. The person more qualified to lead is not the physically stronger person. It is the more intelligent, the more knowledgeable, the more creative, the more innovative. There are no hormones for those attributes. We have evolved, but our ideas of gender have not evolved with them. It is an antiquated notion of gender that divides us. Oh, I understand the desire to separate, to give order, to make everything tidy and predictable, to make things feel safe, but gender is not the place we need to do it. We should be doing it around justice, about fairness, about decency, about kindness. And I know those sound very weak and effeminate, but we're beyond that now. She says we have evolved. Maybe we are actually devolving. Or, to put it in a Buddhist context, maybe we are relinquishing something our ancestors needed to get along in the world. The same way they once needed gods of fire and thunder and rain to explain their world. Well, we don't need gods of fire and thunder and rain. We know how they operate. We no longer need gender to determine how we run our lives either. It will not be easy. You still go into the toy store and that purple aisle is all about the girls, isn't it? Purple and pink. And over here it's the red and the blue. This will not be easy. We like using the simple symbols, the more convenient ones, the established ones, that boys do this and girls do that, and that those that are in the middle are creepy somehow. But at some point, if we continue pressing along, if we allow ourselves to relinquish what we think we need so we can pick up what we truly do need, gender will still exist, but it will describe us, not define us. Someday, said Emma Goldman, a century ago, men and women will rise. They will be big and strong and free. Just imagine that. In fact, she says, what imagination, what poetic genius can foresee the potentialities of such a force? That is our task. Ourselves, our children, and certainly our grandchildren, to cultivate an imagination beyond gender, to become the poetic geniuses, the ones that are pregnant with impossibilities. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. We're going to sing a wonderful song written by Malvina Reynolds, she of the Little Houses Built of Ticky-Tacky. But she also wrote other songs. And she took this as a gloss on Shakespeare. Oh, what a piece of work we are. Taken from The Tempest. Oh, what a piece of work is man. So we'll sing that together, and I'll give you a little blessing, and we will see you later. I'll be back here next week. No, I won't. Jason will be here next week doing great things. Come. He throws a good worship service. Shall we?